more than 30 years, both California and federal records documented dozens of assaults and multiple homicides directed by individuals already behind bars. La M never needed to show its face in person. A name written on a piece of paper could still lead to violence on the streets. This is the top 10 of the most dangerous members of the Mexican Mafia's violent branch, the ones who decided who lived and who died from behind prison walls. Number 10. Ramon Mundo Mendoza. In May 1969, a 15-year-old member of the White Fence Gang collapsed on a Boyle Heights sidewalk after a fatal attack during a barrio conflict. According to later gang records, that incident happened right when a new name from Barrio Nuevo Estrada began to surface in violent neighborhood disputes: Ramon Mundo Mendoza. For many who grew up in Estrada courts at that time, this was the moment they realized Mundo was not someone who would stop at any limit to protect his set's interests. The turning point came when Mendoza entered the California prison system in the early 1970s. His years in San Quentin and Folsom placed him at the center of the Mexican Mafia's rise, a period when La M transformed from a prison protection group for Mexican inmates into a disciplined force with ambitions to control the streets. Mundo was not the type to sit at the table. He was known as the one assigned to handle problems when the organization needed to send a message stronger than words. In interviews many years later, Mendoza admitted to being involved in or directly responsible for around 9 homicides during his time of loyalty to La M. Some incidents targeted street rivals. But what made his name significant inside the group was that he was trusted with missions only the most loyal could receive, removing former members who had lost the organization's protection. For La M, that was not just discipline. It was how they maintained power. According to Mendoza's account, major decisions were often passed through tiny slips of paper, called kites, traveling from one cell to another. One short line, a single name, and the rest was up to people like Mundo. Act fast, act decisively, and leave no room for debate. That method gave La M its reputation across the prison system. They never needed to see the person giving the order to know it had to be carried out. By the late 1970s, the story shifted. In 1978, Mendoza began cooperating with law enforcement, providing details about the Mexican Mafia's structure, including its connections to senior figures like Joe Pegleg Morgan. For an organization that prized silence above everything, that step crossed a line no one was allowed to cross. From that moment, Mendoza became a marked man. Today, he speaks openly in interviews and books about gang life, describing with calm reflection how a small piece of paper could decide whether someone lived or died. For those who once saw La M as the ultimate authority, the very fact that he continues to tell the story keeps the name Mundo alive, as both a warning and a reminder that sometimes the man who once held the knife is the same one who exposes the hand behind it. Number 9. Jose Alberto "Bat" Marquez. On the night of June 25, 1994, inside a private conference room in Monterey Park, California, an offer was made. $2 million, plus heavy weapons and help to cross the border, in exchange for one target: Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The person presenting the deal on behalf of the Arellano Felix cartel was not a Tijuana gunman. It was a Mexican Mafia member from San Diego, Jose Alberto "Bat" Marquez. Marquez grew up in South San Diego, where border gangs were influenced by California prisons and drawn into the cross-border drug trade. According to investigative files and accounts from former officers, Bat quickly became a key link between La M and the Tijuana cartel, also known as AFO. His role went beyond being a triggerman. He recruited and trained others, bringing young shooters from San Diego into Tijuana, enforcing discipline, and assigning missions based on the chain of command. During the meth wars of the early 1990s, local records documented more than 20 killings in 1993 alone tied to the San Diego conflict, the same environment where Bat moved freely. After AFO's feared enforcer David Popeye Barron was killed in late 1997, several sources said Bat took charge of the cartel's Sicario unit until his arrest. The operational model, as described by investigators, was consistent. The cartel set the target. La M provided manpower and discipline, and Bat served as the bridge, fluent in prison law and street execution. Marquez not only enforced La M's code, he exported it, bringing the prison organization's methods into Mexico's cartel wars. Many of the missions involved abductions and killings on the Mexican side of the border, where the victims' remains were often left as messages from the Tijuana cartel. On both sides of the border, the name Bat Marquez came to represent a kind of organized violence, quiet, precise, and rarely leaving direct evidence. The law eventually caught up. In 2002, federal prosecutors in San Diego charged Bat and several AFO associates with drug and weapons offenses. In November 2003, he was captured in Mexico. On January 20, 2007, Mexico extradited him to the United States. According to the Department of Justice, he served as an enforcer, bodyguard, and manager of stash sites for the AFO. In March 2011, a federal jury convicted him of conspiracy to distribute and possess methamphetamine with intent to distribute. In November that same year, he was sentenced to life in prison. Yet his story did not end there. In 2017, during a federal operation targeting the Mexican Mafia network in Southern California, prosecutors described two prison-based command groups, one connected to Jose "Bat" Marquez. The setup was familiar. Smuggled cell phones, coded kite letters, filtered emails, and orders reaching San Diego's streets, demanding payments, managing drug sales, and punishing those who broke tax rules. What made Bat memorable was not the number of bullets fired, but his ability to replicate violence, to recruit, to discipline, to connect a prison organization with a cartel across the border, and to keep control even while incarcerated. From that hotel meeting in 1994 to his life sentence in 2011 and his alleged prison operations in 2017, the name Bat Marquez represents one enduring truth. When violence becomes a system, people become its parts, and those parts can exist on either side of the border. Number 8. Martin Madrigal Cazares, also known as Evil. In early September 2023, a man was shot and killed in Baja California. To local authorities, it appeared to be just another criminal retaliation. But across the border, investigators in California knew exactly who he was. Martin Madrigal Cazares, known as Evil, a member of the Mexican Mafia who had been deported in 2006 but still held power in Ventura County at the time of his death. Evil grew up in East Oxnard, where Colonia Chiques was one of the most influential Sereno sets in Ventura County. His role in the neighborhood led him into the Mexican Mafia in the early 2000s. According to a former prison supervisor, when Evil was newly made, he was considered a bit too eager with his hands, earning him a written warning from senior members. Yet that same boldness helped him climb the ranks quickly. In 2006, Evil was deported to Mexico. For many, that would have been the end. But law enforcement records show that from Tijuana, he kept calling back to California, continuing to collect taxes from drug distributors in Oxnard. The rates were set clearly: $100 a week for small deals, $250 to $300 a week for shipments up to half a kilo. A gang member caught on a wiretap said that when someone complained about money, the usual response was, "Don't make us turn you off right now." In other words, a phone call from Mexico could still make someone disappear in Ventura. Money wasn't the only thing he controlled. Evil also authorized punishment. A California member once had to ask his permission to smash a man claiming to belong to La M. Decisions about who could be attacked and who could be spared rested with a man hundreds of miles away. This was exactly the kind of power model the Mexican Mafia wanted, to rule by fear from anywhere. Even while imprisoned in Baja and Rosarito, Evil continued the same system. Reports indicated that he enforced La M's rules among inmates deported from the United States, causing so much tension that authorities had to transfer him several times. His cross-border influence proved one thing: Evil didn't need to be in America to control what happened there. That influence also brought internal conflict. Some Mexican Mafia members in California sent warnings: "Follow him, and you're against us." When even allies began to fear a man's reach, it meant he had crossed the limits the organization itself had set. In January 2023, Evil was arrested in Rosarito while driving an F-150 truck with California plates, carrying military-grade weapons. However, as in many past cases, he was later released. Months later, he was shot and killed. Authorities did not disclose a motive. His story didn't end in court or with a life sentence. Evil died in the same place from which he once controlled people in the United States, on the Mexican side of the border. And that fact alone explains why both countries stayed cautious of him until the very end, because borders had never limited his power. Number 7. Daniel Black Dan Barela. In April 1995, federal prosecutors charged 22 members of the Mexican Mafia in a large-scale operation in Los Angeles. Among the names, investigators paid special attention to one, Daniel Black Dan Barela, a man who, according to records, once handed out rubber-handled knives to an entire La M meeting before discussing how to punish a violator. Barela grew up in White Fence, one of East LA's oldest Mexican-American gangs. That background made him part of La Eme's early generation, men who believed power was measured by how fast and decisively they could act against rivals. Investigators described him as the type who read the Bible every day, but when it was time, he struck first and talked later. Unlike many of his contemporaries who operated only inside prison walls, Barela often intervened on the streets. One case recorded in court files described how he and his associates went to a lawyer's office in San Diego, assaulted and threatened him for allegedly failing to protect a member's interests. The incident showed that even legal professionals were not beyond La Eme's reach when Barela decided discipline was required. During the early 1990s, Barela sat in a key position as La Eme expanded its control, collecting taxes from Sereno cliques, deciding who could do business and who had to pay the price. Testimonies and FBI reports identified him as one of the leaders responsible for enforcing that system through violence. The 1995 RICO indictment detailed conspiracies to commit at least 4 murders linked to maintaining the organization's power. It described secret meetings where knives were distributed as tools of enforcement. In 1997, after a lengthy trial, Barela was convicted of RICO violations and conspiracy to commit murder. The appellate court later upheld most of his sentence, confirming his role in the group's leadership core. Witnesses and former members, including Rene Boxer Enriquez, called Barela a mentor to many younger soldiers. Within La Eme, that meant when he acted, others learned from him. It was the kind of influence the organization valued most, not just handling the work himself, but creating others who could do the same. On January 17, 2007, Daniel Black Dan Barela was found deceased inside the segregation unit at USP Victorville, where he was serving multiple federal sentences. The man who once placed knives in others' hands met his end in a locked cell. But the system of control he helped shape continued to influence prisons and streets across Southern California for years that followed. Number 6. David Smilon Gallardo. On September 3, 1997, inside a federal courtroom in Los Angeles, David Smilon Gallardo was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 300 months for 3 homicides and multiple RICO charges. He turned around and smiled at his girlfriend sitting behind him. That smile carried a message. His real power didn't lie in the sentence, but in Ramona Gardens, where he once decided who lived and who died. Ramona Gardens in Boyle Heights was the base of Big Hazard, one of the oldest street gangs tied to the Mexican Mafia. Gallardo was made into La Eme at a time when the organization was shifting toward a system of taxation, discipline, and punishment to tighten its control over the streets. Few people embodied that transition more than he did. On March 25, 1992, Charles Charlie Brown Manriquez, a Mexican Mafia member, was shot 6 times with a .380 pistol in the middle of Ramona Gardens. Court documents identified Gallardo as the shooter. Records showed that Manriquez had been involved with the film American Me, a movie many within La Eme considered disrespectful to the organization. That shooting marked the beginning of a wave of internal retribution. Just weeks later, on May 13, 1992, Ana Lizarraga, known as the Gang Lady for helping the American Me film crew access gang communities, was shot to death outside her home in East LA. The shooter was Jose Joker Gonzalez, and according to investigators, it was Smilon who proposed her elimination, fearing she sided with Hollywood over La Eme's code. On August 7, 1993, Manuel Rocky Luna, a high-ranking EME member in Ramona Gardens, was found shot to death in his car. The order, prosecutors said, came from the leadership group, and Gallardo was part of the designated hit team. Then on December 3, 1993, Ricardo Rascal Gonzalez was fatally stabbed near Smokey's Wall, also in Ramona Gardens, after being accused of breaking internal rules. 4 violent incidents in less than 2 years, 3 deaths in the same neighborhood. The message was unmistakable. Ramona Gardens belonged to La Eme, and Smilon was the enforcer keeping it that way. Around the same time, Smilon raised the tax on his own Big Hazard gang for messing with customers. The move caused such tension that veteran member Topo Peters had to intervene to lift a greenlight order. When a Mexican Mafia member could make his entire home gang bow their heads, it showed what true power looked like. During trial, prosecutors described Gallardo as representing the new face of La Eme, killing to enforce rules, killing to send messages, and killing to control cash flow. That same coldness remained until the very end, when he smiled before a sentence that would never end. Some die on the streets, others inside prison. Smilon entered federal custody with a sentence longer than the life he had lived. But what made him dangerous wasn't the sentence. It was the 3 bodies and 1 smile that still haunt Ramona Gardens to this day. Number 5. Eulalio Lalo Martinez. In 2007, Eulalio Lalo Martinez appeared in a Pasadena courtroom, hoping for release after more than a decade in Pelican Bay. But just as his attorney mentioned the word parole, a detective entered with an old file, the 1998 shooting of Donald Pato Schubert. From that moment, Lalo began doing what very few inmates ever could, taking over the jail itself. Lalo came from Lomas Rosemead, a long-standing Sereno gang in the San Gabriel Valley. When the Mexican Mafia began tightening its control on the streets, Lalo proved he was not just a follower, he was a commander. The Schubert case showed that. The shooter had already confessed, but 3 inmates later testified that the order came from Lalo himself. The motive, prosecutors said, involved Schubert's suspected link to the deaths of Lalo's 2 brothers, Abelardo and Genaro Martinez. For Lalo, personal revenge and organizational discipline were one and the same. Inside Pelican Bay's security housing unit, he continued to run Lomas through kites, tiny slips of paper written in microscopic handwriting. On February 23, 2001, a riot erupted between Sereno and black inmates, leaving 28 injured and 3 shot by guards. According to investigations, Lalo and Alfred "Alfie" Sosa had ordered the clash from inside the SHU. He wasn't just controlling one neighborhood, he could trigger a full-scale prison conflict with a single command. When transferred to Men's Central Jail in 2007 for the Schubert case, Lalo used the opportunity to seize control of the jail system itself. According to investigators, over 6 years, Martinez managed every stream of income inside, collecting a 1/3 tax, funneling money through green dot cards, and smuggling heroin and meth with the help of a compromised deputy. Every punishment had to pass through Lalo's approval, often delivered through kites. Numerous jail stabbings during that period were linked to power struggles between Lalo and other carnales competing for dominance. In 2013, Lalo died of a heroin overdose inside the very jail he once controlled. No announcements, no spotlight. Only a brief medical report closed the file on a man who had ruled a violent empire from solitary confinement. But his kites remained, still circulating among new carnales, preserving the same system he once perfected. Number 4. Luis Pelon Maciel. On the night of April 22, 1995, at a house on 3843 Maxon Road in El Monte, gunfire ended the lives of 5 people. The investigation later led directly to Luis Pelon Maciel, a young recruit recently brought into the Mexican Mafia by Raymond Huero Shryock. The order, according to prosecutors, was simple: leave no witnesses. Court records identified Huero as the one who authorized the hit on Dido for leaving the organization. Maciel was the one who planned and executed the operation, recruiting the shooters from the Sangre gang: Richard Primo Valdez, Jimmy Character Palma, Danny Tricky Logan, and Anthony Scar Torres. Though Maciel was not inside the house that night, he acted as the coordinator, selecting the team, setting the timing, and delivering the directive. Take out the target. Leave no witnesses. The motive was straightforward. Dido had walked away from La M, and in the gang's code, walking away meant betrayal, a crime that required punishment. What made this case stand out, even among seasoned investigators, was one detail. Maciel knew there were children in the house, yet the plan went forward. Court documents confirmed this fact. In traditional Sereno and La M culture, harming women or children was considered a red line almost never crossed. But this time, the silencing order overrode every boundary. Pelon operated like a field officer. He didn't pull the trigger himself. He outsourced the job to another set, turning an internal execution into a structured mission. That model reflected how La M in the San Gabriel Valley functioned during the 1990s. Leadership set the objective, lieutenants selected the tools, and the soldiers made sure the task was completed. Prosecutors pursued the case aggressively. On August 5, 1998, Luis Pelon Maciel was sentenced to death for 5 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, multiple victims, and the intent to silence witnesses. The California Supreme Court later upheld the verdict in People v. Maciel, confirming the chain of command. Huero gave the order, Maciel organized it, and Sangre carried it out. Maciel remains on California's death row. Beyond the Maxon Road murders, law enforcement records linked Maciel to illicit financial operations within county jails, including alleged drug trafficking rings, showing he was not only a violent organizer, but also part of La Eme's money-generating structure. The story didn't end in 1995. What set Maciel apart was his willingness to take an order to its extreme, killing women and children to ensure silence. That decision marked a level of brutality the organization rarely reached, used only when a target had to be erased at any cost. Number 3. Raymond Huero Shryock. In May 1997, inside a Los Angeles federal courtroom, prosecutors pointed toward a quiet, gray-haired white man. Raymond Huero Shryock. He had no tattoos, no shouting presence, but according to federal records, he was the man who signed the order that led to the killing of 5 people, including 2 children, in El Monte back in 1995. Huero grew up in Latino barrios across East Los Angeles and the San Gabriel Valley. Though Anglo, he spoke fluent barrio Spanish and lived like any other Sereno kid. That cultural immersion brought him into the Mexican Mafia during the 1970s, part of the old generation that built the foundation of La Eme's code: absolute discipline and zero tolerance for betrayal. By the early 1990s, Shryock was described as a key coordinator for La Eme in the San Gabriel Valley. He oversaw meth distribution, collected street taxes from sets such as El Monte Flores, Sangra, and Lomas, and maintained the order that held the organization together. And when someone thought they had grown too powerful to obey, discipline was enforced. That year's target was Anthony Dido Moreno, a former member who had left La Eme roughly 12 years earlier. To La Eme, leaving was never forgiveness. It was treason. Shryock did not pull the trigger himself. He delegated the job to Luis Pelon Maciel, a protege he had personally mentored, and authorized him to assemble the hit team. Later court findings showed that Shryock knew children were inside the house and allowed the plan to move forward. Discipline took priority over morality. The red line was erased. The next day, when a witness asked him directly, "Was it you guys?" Huero reportedly apologized for the family's deaths, but never admitted wrongdoing. For the organization, that answer said everything. Internal order came first. Consequences came second. That wasn't the only order linked to him. Federal RICO files described Shryock as a decision-maker involved in at least 4 additional planned killings tied to tax enforcement and drug distribution control across the San Gabriel Valley. On May 31, 1997, he was convicted of RICO violations, conspiracy to commit murder, and conspiracy to distribute narcotics. The sentence: life without parole. In 2003, his appeal was denied. In 2021, another request for sentence reduction was rejected, with the court citing his leadership role and the brutality of his crimes as reasons to uphold the life term. According to testimony from former members such as Rene Boxer and Enriquez, Huero was the type of leader who rarely spoke, but whose words carried lethal weight. If he said this man was good, everyone believed him. One nod from him created soldiers like Pelon, and gunfire that, decades later, people still blame on nameless ghosts. Now in his 70s, Huero grows old in the federal system. Yet the orders he once gave remain quoted in court documents and gang studies as proof of one enduring truth. In the Mexican Mafia, the most dangerous man is not the one who pulls the trigger. It is the one who decides where that trigger will point. Number 2. Michael Big Mike Lerma. On the night of June 28th into the 29th, 2020, inside the Metropolitan Detention Center in Los Angeles, a 40-year-old inmate named Steve Bencomb was found deceased in his cell. Surveillance footage and inmate statements quickly directed investigators toward Michael Big Mike Lerma, a name Pomona police had known since the 1980s. According to federal records, Bencomb had failed to pay a drug debt tied to the Pomona crew. The order for his punishment was approved and carried out right inside the federal facility. In March 2025, a federal jury convicted Lerma and 3 associates of RICO, VICAR murder, and first-degree homicide. A mandatory life sentence was all but certain. Lerma stood apart from most other carnales in one disturbing way. He was elderly, yet still ordering killings while in federal custody. At over 65 when the MDC murder took place, officials described him as the man who made the rules in the housing unit. Punishments ranged from light discipline to smash-outs to stabbings, and ultimately, executions for anyone who broke the code or failed to pay a debt. This system mirrored exactly how the Mexican Mafia operated across Southern California's major jails. Except now it was happening inside a federal institution, To understand how an aging man could still command such violence, you have to go back to Pomona. Lerma grew up there, joined a local street gang at age 12, and later enlisted in the Marine Corps. He was discharged at 18 after being implicated in a homicide. In 1982, he was sentenced to 15 years to life for fatally shooting a man during a heroin dispute. By 1995, California prison officials identified him as a Mexican Mafia member, though Lerma denied it. His influence was tied directly to Pomona. Anyone who wanted to sell drugs or do business in that area had to pay 1/3 of their profits, a rule that federal agents later called Operation Dirty Thirds. In the Dirty Thirds indictment of 2018, investigators described Lerma as the one collecting 1/3 taxes from Pomona's drug trade and moving the proceeds into prison accounts through women, green dot cards, and commissary channels. When Lerma was transferred to the Metropolitan Detention Center awaiting federal trial, the Pomona structure followed him inside. With associates nicknamed Popeye, Swifty, and Squeaks, he reestablished order and managed debts from within the cell block. The message from the MDC case was clear. Age did not make Lerma less dangerous, and prison walls did not freeze his authority. His life formed a cold pattern. His first homicide at 18, another at 26, and even in his senior years, ordering death from behind bars. For the Mexican Mafia, presence is never required to inspire fear. It's enough that everyone believes one nod from him means the sentence will be carried out, whether in Pomona, Calipatria, or inside the heart of the MDC Los Angeles. Number 1. Reuben Night Owl Castro. During the meetings of 1994 and 1995, where Mexican Mafia carnales discussed who should die, one representative was always present from 18th Street, Reuben Night Owl Castro. Audio and surveillance footage confirmed his attendance. Investigators recorded one of his remarks. "If he wants to break away from us, he'll turn into nothing real fast." When a shot caller like Night Owl said that, the target's fate was usually sealed. Some only survived because law enforcement intervened in time, not because Castro changed his mind. Night Owl came from the 18th Street gang around MacArthur Park and Westlake, one of the most notorious sets in West Los Angeles. During the early 1990s, he coordinated two of its most powerful cliques, Shadow Park Locos and Hoover Locos. He collected taxes, controlled street drug routes, and used violence to enforce La Ime's order. His seat at the decision table alongside figures like Huero Shai, Black Dan, and Smilon Gallardo showed how high he stood in the hierarchy. On May 31, 1997, Reuben Castro was convicted of RICO violations, conspiracy to commit murder, and conspiracy to distribute narcotics. The sentence: life in prison without parole. Federal prosecutors believed this would sever his grip on Los Angeles streets, but the opposite happened. Castro was transferred to ADX Florence, the federal supermax prison reserved for the most dangerous inmates. Locked down 23 hours a day, he continued giving orders through coded letters and female intermediaries, especially Jesusita Susie Ramirez. His commands and punishments reached the outside world as if he had never left Westlake. Where prosecutors expected his power to fade, Night Owl turned confinement into remote command. In MacArthur Park, everything that generated money was taxed, from fruit vendors and ice cream carts to drug operations. Late payments led to beatings. Disobedience led to stabbings. Rebellion led to disappearances. The proceeds followed a clear path, from 18th Street soldiers through intermediaries all the way to ADX Florence. On November 18, 2008, federal prosecutors added 27 years and 3 months to Castro's sentence for continuing to run criminal operations while already serving life. It was official recognition that imprisonment did not equal isolation. In the Mexican Mafia, not everyone holding a gun is the most dangerous man. Reuben Night Owl Castro proved the opposite. The gun always pointed where he wanted, even while he sat locked behind the concrete walls of ADX Florence,